watch the plugs.
Cord.
Don't heckle us, dude.
Oh, yeah. I am an alcoholic. My home group is the Thursday night study group in Fort Lauderdale, and my name is Brian.
Brian.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. Nice lid, sir. I can't wear it, though, because I'll be too hot. I need a haircut. That's why I decided to wear it. It's the strangest things. Glad to be here. My foot's better, for those of you. Thanks for asking, folks. I haven't stepped on any plugs since last Friday. Those are the plugs to which he was referring. And my foot is healing, it seems. And Paul's going to turn the air down. Watch that. Yeah. Step 10. Let's not do step 10. Let's just skip that one. Let's do. But I don't want to miss a week, so we're going to do the 12 traditions tonight. Wow. So, I'm sorry.
Oh, please.
You know, you probably would actually prefer my 12 traditions talk to my step 10 talk, to be honest with you. I don't have any words tonight, so maybe we'll open it up to everyone else to share. No, we're not going to do that. An open discussion meeting, Norm? No. Step 10. So we didn't just come to Alcoholics Anonymous and pop in on step 10, although it looks like most of the faces in here are familiar. Not all of them are. And it's not as much for you as it is for me. I know that every single week, for those of you who have been here, most of these weeks, I've been a broken record to a large extent for the first half. And if you think I've been a broken record for the first 9 weeks, you're really in for a broken record treat tonight. Because at the end of the day, so in order for me to recap, I'm going to do the first 9 steps. And then we're going to talk about step 10. And you know what step 10 is? The first 9 steps. So we're going to really be repetitive tonight. But I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous because I was interested in having a spiritual experience or because I wanted to be a better person. I didn't necessarily even want to accomplish very much in my life. I really only wanted to be able to stay sober and stay clean. And I didn't have much in the way of aspirations other than that when I got here. And so everything else that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me is a gift. But more than that, it is Alcoholics Anonymous has brought me into a way of living that I didn't even know was possible. So it was a gift that I wouldn't even have known to set my sights on. And so I'm very blessed to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very blessed to have had, just everything about it. I know like week in and week out, I probably complain about the slow start I got and how I learned things the hard way. And the truth of the matter is I'm grateful for all of that too. Because it's, learning things the hard way and not being a very good listener has created bumps in the road that have me understand things the way that I understand them, and I'm really I think I'm really grateful for for having had those experiences and having had those experiences throughout my sobriety. But it started because I could not quit drinking and I couldn't control it once I started. That's where it started, and for me, being in Alcoholics Anonymous at a big book study where a couple of guys knew something about the book Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a couple of years sober and I heard the first step for the first time. The first step had been talked about many times, but I heard it for the first time. I heard that I have a twofold illness, an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. And when I take alcohol into my system, my body reacts with a physical craving for more and I cannot stop. And that despite that fact and numerous examples of that fact in my life, My mind could not see that just before I took a drink. Just before I took a drink, I had some story, some version of how this was going to turn out okay, despite the fact that it never has. Once I got that information, and I don't know why that information eluded me for as long as it did. Maybe it was just that I was finally ready to listen when I finally heard it. I don't know. But all of a sudden, I was here in a way that I was not before. I identified with powerlessness. Once I saw myself in the way that these guys were explaining it, maybe for other people, different ways of explaining it is the thing that has them go, oh, wow, yes, you're right, I'm powerless. But for me, it was the doctor's opinion, the explanation of allergy of the body, obsession of the mind. And all of a sudden, I saw my problem in a way I'd never seen it before, and I saw that I was screwed. Because to really get step one, you have to, like, the come from is, holy shit, this is serious. I am screwed. Like, I get it that I'm going to drink again, and there's nothing I can do about it unless I find AA's answer. And AA's answer is a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That's the second step. We came to believe that maybe I can have the spiritual experience that the folks who wrote this book had, and the many members of Alcoholics Anonymous who were sharing their experience had. Maybe that's possible for me too. Is the second step. And so once those two things were snapped in perspective like that for me, I was all in. For the first time, I've been going to meetings for a couple of years. For the first time, I was all in. Like, no kidding, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to have that experience, because for the first time, I understood the reality of my situation, which is that my life depended on it. Not just the quality of my life, not just, it'd be nice to stay. I understood that I was going to die unless I had a spiritual experience. And if you know my story, if you know where I came from, it's crystal clear that if I drink again, I'm probably going to die. Like, that's a reality of where I left off. And so for the first time, I was participating in AA like my life depended on it. And so I was able to actually take step 3. I was finally, because of step 1 being snapped into perspective, I was able to come to believe that AA's solution could possibly work for me, and I was able to choose in a way that I had not before. And so I started writing an inventory, because my sponsor got me to work on that right away. And did a 5th step, shared that inventory with him. And I had done an inventory before. It wasn't the one out of the big book. I don't know if that's the reason why this one made a bigger difference. It probably lends at least some of it, but again, I'm participating now like somebody whose life depends on it. And so no matter what inventory you put in front of me, I'm doing that like nobody's business, right? And so, my sponsor happened to hand me the sheets that, follow the outline in the big book, and I was able to do a resentment and a fears and a sex and a harms done other inventory, and for the first time see how I was responsible for all of this stuff that had happened in my life. Now, I'm sure other people had at least glimpses of responsibility in their lives before this process. I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those. I don't know whether it's because I got sober when I was 19 and I'm still a kid pretty much in my early 20s when I'm doing this. I don't know. But that inventory was the first time I ever saw a picture of my life where I was responsible for all the stuff that had happened. And so that 5th step didn't just include that perspective about how I was at fault and how I'm responsible for all of this stuff, but it included the pettiness and just the silliness of the things that were important to me and the things that were driving me were just petty and ridiculous, and it was the first time anybody had ever heard me admit to any of those things. With that in the past, because that's what the 4th and 5th step does. It takes the past and puts it in the past, at least to the extent that we got it down on paper and shared it with another person. The past was finally in the past. But of course, the problem with that is, I did 6 and 7, and I asked God to remove those things. And in that moment, I really was ready to have God remove all of those character defects. I mean, I have just written it all down. I've just exposed it to another person. In that time and space, I was absolutely willing to have all of those character defects removed, because I was very much in touch with how I had created all of this chaos in my life and in the lives of the people that I love. And in that mindset, I was absolutely ready, and asked God to remove them. The problem is I woke up the next day and, I'm still me. And what made it worse is, I was still me expecting that I wouldn't be. And then I was still me pretending like I wasn't. And then I was still me doing all the same stuff, creating, dragging essentially the past, not literally the past, but dragging the same types of results into the present and therefore into my future. And so 6 and 7 was hard for me, not because the work is hard, although the work it's not hard. It requires a lot of intention. It requires a lot of awareness. And I'm not used to living my life from a place of awareness or a place of intention. Those aren't ways that I had experienced living. And so it took a while. It took a long time, as a matter of fact. It took several years, I think, before I even understood what 6 and 7 were asking me to do. And then it took a couple of more to actually allow the program of Alcoholics Anonymous to change my life. It doesn't have to take that long. So don't hear that story and make up that, because I did. I certainly heard stories of people who it took a long time. I was, if it took you 20 years to walk into the forest, it's going to take you 20 years to, you don't have to buy that. You can absolutely get this in a very short period of time. But it helps if you're willing and get started from the very beginning. If you dilly-dally and hang out in AA, thinking meetings are the answers for as long as I did, you're going to create the type of pain and suffering that I created in sobriety unnecessarily. And again, today I look back at it and go, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful, because really how I came into understanding what 6 and 7 was, and there was like even the people in my life who had the lessons that I needed to learn and see, and the experience that I could actually identify with and follow, weren't there when I was at 6 and 7. It took me beating my head against the wall and being embarrassed amongst my own group members. For me to even see that, oh wow, I'm not even doing this. Like I'm missing this part of the program. The most important, and today what looks like the most important part of the program. Maybe it's not the most important part of the program. Maybe it was just the most important part of the program to me because I had been missing it for so long, But 6 and 7 is where, and so there were a lot of conversations about myself and about the world around me and the people in my life that had to undergo massive adjustments and rearrangements in order for me to make progress. And it doesn't have to take that long, but it took that long for me. But once it started to happen, holy cow. And so we're going to come back to that actually in step 10. So 6 and 7 to me is the biggest part of step 10. So we're going to come back to it in just a few minutes, hopefully for your sake. If you don't utilize the tools of the program to change the way they're designed, if that's for me, take a message. If you don't utilize the tools of the program the way they're to make real changes in your life, like I didn't, it becomes actually hard to make amends. It's actually more difficult to understand what and how I hurt people and what is necessary in order to correct it when I'm still showing up as the same guy. Now, I'm being a little hard on myself in that statement because I wasn't the same guy. There were a lot of I did a lot of crappy things. And most of the really crappy things that I was doing to hurt the people around me, most of that behavior ceased early on in the process. But anybody who was paying attention could see that I'm still selfish, dishonest, self-seeking and inconsiderate. Yeah, I'm not stealing from my parents anymore. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I was, a generous, loving son. That took a while. It took a while for me to change who I was as a person. It took a while for God to change. I say I changed. And by the way, even as I talk about that, you'll notice that it's impossible for me to change myself, right? But it's impossible for God to work in my life without my persistent cooperation. And so when I say I change, it's because I have to do my part of this thing. I can't do God's part of this thing for sure. But if I'm not willing to do my part of this deal, God's going to be like, next. Who's ready? And and that's the way my sponsor would have been also. That's the way I am as a sponsor. Next, who's ready? So I was actually having a conversation. Well, that's a step 12 conversation. We'll leave that alone. So it took me a long time to grow into 8 and 9 as well. It took me a long time to really see what it was about me that had to change, because part of the struggle with 8 and 9 is that I was still fundamentally driven by a lot of the same character defects, even if I wasn't doing all of the same exact stuff. And so until I changed, until 6 and 7, until this program had an opportunity to really work on me, most of the amends that I made were superficial and surfacey and incomplete, and only addressed things that I could actually see. And there was so much more that I wasn't able to see that didn't get addressed until later on. And so, again, boy, that's the good news and the bad news, isn't it? The good news is I've been around long enough and have made enough mistakes and have, reapplied the steps to my life and have listened to enough people who have opened up new possibilities for, how the steps have worked in their life, which has allowed me to see myself differently and grow in a new way, And the good news is if you stick around with Alcoholics Anonymous, you get to grow in that way. And if we don't stay sober and don't stick around, maybe we don't. Thank God that I did. The bad news is I probably could have made, again, I always do that to myself. I probably could have made better progress, but I'm very, very grateful for the lessons that I learned along the way. And so I'll take it the way I have it. The whole point of so my sponsor talks about the program in this way. Implement now, perfect later. The whole point of 4 through 9 was to learn how. To learn how to inventory, to learn how to be honest with somebody about what's driving you, to learn what it's like to get to a place where I'm ready to have a character defect removed, and from that place of humility, ask God to remove it, and have that happen in the now, when it can actually make a difference and alter the rest of my life. And really, that is the way that it works, believe it or not. And it's the small things. It really is. It's the small things. I thought it was the big things, and I thought I was, and it's probably why I thought I was doing just fine, because all the big stuff, all that stuff went away. I wasn't stealing and robbing and cheating, and I wasn't doing the grossest parts of the character defects, and I thought that was probably good enough. But if I've learned anything, what I've learned is it's the little things that when they change, the change is massive. The effects in my life and the effects in the perspective and my outlook on life, those changes are massive. And so we go through 4 through 9 to learn how, and we get to step 10, which says, you remember those things, 4 through 9? Do them every day. That's all step 10 is. Thanks for letting me share. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, that's all step 10 is, though. It's 4 through 9 all the time. And the evidence of that, and I sort of did this a couple of weeks ago. I said, if you look at step 10 on the wall, it says continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Right? And if you look at the step on the wall, this is an important lesson that I learned. If you look at the step on the wall, it's crystal clear that we take inventory and we apologize. Right? That's what the step on the wall says. But that's not what step 10 is. That's just the bullet point in the list of steps. Right? I haven't done this the whole time. I've not opened this book and read anything. But I'm going to read this. David, what page is it on? Ooh, very good, very good. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. So we refer to this as a maintenance step, but clearly we're supposed to grow from this step. The word continue has been used now 4 times. And there isn't anything about the word continue that means at night. This is not a nightly inventory. This is a continuous, all day long, every moment of every day inventory. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Which step did we do that in? Step 4, right? When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. In which steps did we become ready to have these character defects removed and ask God to remove them? 6 and 7. We discuss them with someone immediately. That's step 5. And make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Steps 8 and 9. Right? And then we turn our thoughts to someone else we can help, which can be seen even as step 12, even though we're not there yet. Right? So the literal instructions, the literal directions for step 10 is to take the things that we've learned in 4 through 9 and put them into practice every single day. That's the point of step 10. And probably that's where it needs to become like a habit. And to some extent, everybody who takes an inventory and everybody who shares that inventory with another person, to some extent, we are always doing step 10, at least to some extent, because once I took that personal inventory, once I saw my life from the perspective that the inventory had me look at my life through, all of a sudden I could hardly see anything except through that lens. Like all of a sudden I would be really angry at somebody, and it would dawn on me that maybe I'm at fault. Right? Now sometimes that took a little longer to come to than other times, but it was a prevalent thought in my mind that I could see. Oh yeah, I've been here before. And the thing about step 10 is that the more I practiced it, the quicker I came around to being able to be responsible about what was going on. And so it's a thing that sort of builds on itself. The more I'm willing to practice it, the easier it is to get into it. Because the hard thing about this way of life is that when it's happening, when I'm really angry at you and really reeling because you did this effed up thing in my mind, I absolutely know that you're wrong. And I absolutely am convinced that I'm right. That's a difficult perspective to puncture. and so, but the reality is, and so this is what began to happen with practice, and it really does. It takes practice. Did I say practice? Because in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, we often say, well, I worked the steps, or I did the steps, or you do the steps. But the proper verb for what we're talking about is practice, because that's all we can do is practice. There's no, we don't do it and we're done, and we don't, the best that I can do is practice it. And the reality of my life today is I'm recovering when I'm practicing it. And I'm not when I'm not. And the people who are the closest to me usually know the difference between those two things before I do. Right? I mean, that's the reality. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know. But, my wife knows when I'm not practicing. Trust me, my wife knows when I'm not practicing, right? And so if I'm not taking inventory, if I'm not confessing what I find, if I'm not asking God to take me to something better, if I'm not spending some time contemplating what God's will might have been in those situations, if I'm not making amends and cleaning that up as soon as I can afterward, if I'm not participating in that process, I'm not recovering from alcoholism. This is the good news and the bad news about Alcoholics Anonymous. The good news is when I'm practicing this, my life really, really, really opens up and I'm blessed. I am really, really blessed. And you hear me say this almost every week, and I haven't said it tonight, but I'm going to say it now. If I take a picture of my life and everything in it that is of any importance to me, all of it is because of this program. All of it is because of the growth that has come in my mind and my heart because of practicing the steps. And I know that. I know it's not just that I'm sober. It seems to me that the fact that I'm sober is the smallest promise that I've gotten. If you look at my life and everything that's in it and how valuable it is, it would seem that staying sober is a small thing compared to the other really great and wonderful things that I have in my life because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That I have because of the steps and the relationships that I've been able to build because of who the steps have allowed me to be. And I'm standing here saying, if it wasn't for the fact that I have a chronic illness that will kill me if I let up, I probably wouldn't do it. That's stupid. It's really, how dumb are alcoholics? We're really stupid. If it wasn't for the fact that I would die with a drink in my hand or a crack pipe, I wouldn't do this thing that has brought me into a level of existence that is absolutely wonderful. And it turned everything, everything I thought about my life completely upside down. I probably wouldn't do it. I would probably stop doing it tomorrow if they made a pill that allowed alcoholics to drink successfully or drink without smoking crack. I would settle for that. I probably that's stupid. So you'll notice that I haven't done these 10 weeks. I haven't done something that is popular for people who do step series to do, and that is to assign principles behind each step. Jordan apparently has some feelings about that. As a matter of fact, I haven't even bothered to commit to memory the agreed upon principles that are behind each steps. That's how little I pay attention to that conversation. And I don't, and it's not my intention to belittle or make wrong people that do. There certainly is nothing wrong with practicing honesty, tolerance, brotherly love. There's nothing wrong with practicing sets of principles like that. I have my own concept of what the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous are. And the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous that we cover in 4 through 9 are simply these to me. Inventory, confession, repentance, and amends. Those are the principles that Alcoholics Anonymous has asked me to practice. When we get to step 12, and it says to practice these principles in all of our affairs, it means, and this is the hair I split with that conversation. To me, it's not those things behind the steps. I promise you, if you pull that thing off the wall, you won't see any principles behind them. That's not. So the reason why this is important to me is because the author intended something with his statement, and what he intended with his statement was that it was necessary for me to practice the very steps themselves as a way of life. That's what the author intended, not something behind them, not some, but the steps themselves. And until I started taking regular inventory, sharing myself honestly with somebody else, spending time in 6 and 7 that was lost on me for so long. And I know I've shared about that ad nauseum, but this is the most important part of step 10 is 6 and 7. So I'm going to probably belabor it some more and contemplate how I've harmed people and chart a course to make those things right, to make amends. Until I started to practice those exact things that the steps taught me to do, I made little to no progress in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was missing the boat. And so the reality is that 4 through 9 taught me tools. They taught me what to do and how to be about certain things. To recognize when I'm getting a little angry, or I'm about to be dishonest and I can see it, or I'm really afraid of something, or to see these things and to use the inventory process. I don't have to write it down necessarily, but I can use the inventory process. What did the inventory process mean? Who am I mad at? What did they do? What part of self is affected? How am I responsible for this situation? Did I do something that created this situation, or have I placed myself in this position, or am I minding somebody else's business and I shouldn't be? Or there's all kinds of reasons why I end up in a position to really be angry at somebody or hate somebody, right? But if I'm not taking the time to discover what that is and to see what is at the root cause, to find the instincts that the instincts was a difficult part of the 4th step for me. It was really, really hard for me to wrap my head around and view my life through the lens of those instinctual drives for security, sex, and the social instinct. But in step 10, oh my God, looking at exactly how and why I'm upset about something that somebody else did last week and it rolled right off my back, that has nothing to do with that person or what they're doing. That has everything to do with me, right? Why am I feeling insecure? Why am I feeling like I'm less than, right? And 9 times out of 10, I can just point to things that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing, or not doing that I should be doing. And that's why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, and that's why you're pissing me off right now, when last week I could care less, right? I couldn't care less. I'm recovering when I'm practicing this, and I'm not when I'm not. It's not something that is, I didn't graduate because I did a 4th and 5th step and completed my 9th step list finally. I didn't graduate in Alcoholics Anonymous. All of that means absolutely nothing if I don't take the tools that I learned in 4 through 9 and put them into practice every day. None of this means anything. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had big problems. I had dug big holes. I owed people lots of money. I had hurt people over long periods of time. I mean, there was a lot of big stuff. And I guess, to some extent, for a long time, I let myself off the hook because I wasn't I didn't have big problems like that. I wasn't creating big stuff like that, and it was good enough. And it was good enough, because I didn't know any better. I didn't see any better. But until I started actually applying the 10th step to my life every day, and more importantly, 6 and 7 in my life every day, I wasn't actually able to make the wholesale changes in my personality and my outlook on life that was possible in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was selling myself short, way short. Probably because I don't know that I ever believed you. I don't know that I really ever believed that a spiritual experience, that a complete alteration, a complete transformation of who I am and how I see the world, I don't really know that I believed it was possible. I think, I was doing what, I knew I couldn't return to drinking and drugging, and I was willing to do everything that I could do, but I don't know that I really believed you. And the thing that started to happen once I started to look at 6 and 7 in my life is, in the context of step 10, is that I started to see that changing even the smallest things, the things that seem insignificant, the character defects that you would never know about, but that I would, right? My favorite. This is an oversimplification, and it's certainly not the deepest one, but it's my favorite one. It's my favorite one because it even happened on my drive over here tonight. Road rage. Right, that's my favorite thing. Because here's the thing. I drive in the car by myself all the time. I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm not cutting you off. I'm not flipping you the bird. As a matter of fact, I stopped flipping the bird. To me, flipping the bird. If you see me drive by you and do this, I just gave you the bird. Now, I'm saying what the bird says, but I'm giving you the peace sign, right? Because I don't want, that's what's happening there. So, if you see that, I just F you. But I did it like this. Because I don't want to spread F you. I want to spread peace and love, right? And that's the best I could muster at the time, right? But I can get myself, but here's the thing. I can get myself really worked up driving a car, especially on 95 with some of you jerks. Sorry, I like to put it that way. Because none of you knows how to drive. I mean, you absolutely suck at it. And here's the thing. You know and I know that I'm kidding. Right? You know that I know better than that, right? But when I'm behind the wheel of that car, I don't know better. I absolutely have it that way. You all suck at driving, and I am the greatest driver that's ever lived. And the world would be better if you all would just drive the way I expect you to drive. Put your phones down, please, first of all. That's the newest thing that really gets me. Because what drivers have learned to do is they've learned, if they're going to be on their phone, to get in the left-hand lane on I-95 and slow down. Because they're not going to rear-end anybody in the left lane, right? Because that's the fast lane, right? So that's what they've learned to do. To me, so the justification for me, the justification in this is I'm not hurting anybody. I'm in the car alone. It was good enough that instead of giving you the bird, I gave you the peace sign as I drove by. I could be screaming at the top of my lungs, but you can't hear me. Only I can. For a long time, I didn't actually scream at anybody on my way over here tonight. But that doesn't mean I didn't yesterday. I don't know if I did yesterday, but that doesn't mean I didn't yesterday. And here's the thing. So my justification, my ability to justify that behavior, to justify getting myself worked up like that is that I'm not hurting anybody. I'm in the car by myself. It's not affecting anybody. But here's the thing. When I get here, I'm with you. And how I've been the last 15 or 20 minutes, I've learned, makes a larger impact on how I'm being in any moment of any day. It's very, very difficult to turn off all of the adrenaline of anger and frustration and self-righteousness and have that, when I get to my client, maybe it's the first time I've ever meeting this client, and I get to the client, how am I going to be when I get in front of that person, right? Because that stuff doesn't just turn off. And so what I find is that when I allow myself to enjoy these character defects, right? Because look, you got to know I enjoy feeling like I know how to drive, and none of you does, right? And you got to know there's a lot about that I really love. I love self-righteousness. You know why I love self-righteousness? Because for the longest time in my life, I felt like a dirty, no good, rotten piece of shit. So when I think that I'm smarter and better than you at anything, it really, really, really goes to my head. I mean, it really magnifies up there. But the reality is it seems like to me, it's justifiable because it seems like it's not hurting anybody else. But the reality is that the longer I allow myself to be run by those emotions and that way of thinking and those character defects, but it sets me in a certain attitude and a certain outlook on life that carries through well past me getting out of the car, right? And it destroys the opportunities that otherwise would have been there. And so so even if it's the smallest thing, even if it's something that only I will know about, it's important for me to see myself honestly, to take stock of what's really going on, to confess what I find with somebody else, which I leave out a lot. It's probably the biggest flaw in my program. So I hope you guys are enjoying this step series. I'm fairly confident in my ability to talk about the 12 steps, but I'm not nearly as good at practicing them. That's the God's honest truth. Because there's two things that happen for me. I can see a character, sometimes, the stuff that I'm inventorying every day, the little flaws, it's not a big deal. I've seen them. Somebody else already knows that I'm dealing with those things. When we have conversations, sometimes we'll catch up, but that's not really but sometimes I see something that's really perverse, that really is either new or it has taken a new direction and have acted out in a way that's very counterproductive and that needs to be shared with somebody. And there's two things that happen. One of the two. I either share that with somebody, which allows me to move on to 6 and 7 in a way that I might be able to make progress on it, or I don't. And I've learned from experience. I've learned over and over and over again. Even since I've said this the last time, I have discovered things about myself and have not communicated with anybody in my life about them. I can tell you it's still the same. If I don't share it, I rationalize it away. Mm-hmm. If I don't tell on myself, if I don't say to somebody what's going on, the next day, I'm usually telling myself how I was being hard on myself yesterday, right? Or some version of that, right? And I shortchange myself. I shortchange the power of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous because I inventory something and I see it clearly for what it is, but I don't get honest about it. And until I get honest about it, I'm not accountable to it. Until I get honest about it, it's not out there in the world where somebody knows that about me, and now I'm going to remember it and call myself up to it in a way that I wouldn't otherwise, right? Because what happens if you give me 2 or 3 days, I not only rationalized it away, I completely forgot I ever inventoried it until I do it again, right? That's what happens. That's literally what happens. And so I have to tell on myself. I have to have somebody in my life. It's not my sponsor. I haven't had a 5th-step conversation with my sponsor in years, to be honest with you. But it's usually the person in the program that I'm closest to at the time. Very often, my busiest sponsee, right? Because they're the ones they're right there, right? And they create permission for me to be honest with them because they're being honest with me constantly, right? And so very often that's who it is. And from that possibility, from now being willing to be accountable and move on to something else, I can actually contemplate and need to contemplate what God's will is. Because here's the thing. If I notice that that's in error, then I don't just because I shared it with somebody doesn't make me automatically susceptible to God's will, right? God's will takes some contemplation. I don't know what God's will is, but here's what I can do. I can say, in that situation, what would God have had me do? And really give some thought and spend some time actually contemplating what God's will would be for me. How would that situation have played out had I done what I think God's will would have been? Right? Maybe I try that the next time. Maybe some version of that. And maybe I screw up again. But at least it's not the same screw up. Right? At least it's not, because that's what I'm used to. I'm used to just screwing up in the same ways over and over and over again. If I try something new and it doesn't work out, it ain't no big deal. It's a brand new screw up. And so I have to actually spend some time thinking about what God's will might have been for me in that specific situation. So that the next time that comes back around, I'm not just asking, well, what am I supposed to do here? Or I'm not just, because that's not what happens, right? I don't start asking about what I'm supposed to do here. I do what I do automatically. Most of my thinking is absolutely just automatic. And so without some alternative already in the mental pipeline to be, I'm going to just do what I did, right? Because I don't think about my life. How many of you actually think about how many of you on your way home from work, decided you needed to stop at the store and get some milk. You're out of milk. Or more importantly, you're out of coffee, right? This is AA. You're out of coffee. And so you decide when you leave work that you're going to stop at the store and get some coffee on your way home. And you ended up in your driveway having never stopped for coffee and completely forgot about it. Because driving home from work is just automatic. Just automatic. I just do it. I just drive. I get in the car and go. I sometimes get on the road. I have a client that lives near 441 in Griffin. Right? It's on my way home. Right? But here's what happens. If I'm not paying attention, I get on the express lane. I can't stop at 441 on the express lane. I can't get off there, right? Because I'm on automatic pilot and I'm just going home, right? If I don't actually if I'm not conscious of the fact that I need to stop at his place, I'm not going to get there. And so most of my life is on automatic pilot. And the step 10 is asking me to stay off of automatic pilot. My automatic pilot is busted. It doesn't work. My automatic pilot is selfish, self-centered, dishonest, self-seeking. It leads to resentment and fear and guilt and remorse. That's automatic pilot leads to that. And it may not lead to it right away, right? And look, to be honest, some of my character assets are on automatic pilot these days. But I imagine if I leave my thinking unchecked long enough, that probably will not be the case. Right? Living this way of life requires intention. It requires that I do it on purpose. I can't just coast through my life, because I'm coasting through my life without checking my thinking and using the steps to track me back towards God's will for me. Without that consistent attention to that, my life is slowly sliding back to automatic pilot. To willy-nilly, however I feel like being or thinking at the time, which clearly for me hasn't worked very well. Clearly for me, using the steps to guide my thinking and track it closer to God's will today than it would have been otherwise has led to consistent growth in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, has led to consistent results in my life. And I know when I'm not, because I usually end up in relationships that are in turmoil, or I have strife, or I'm afraid to see somebody, or there's all kinds of things that go on when I'm not doing this. And so it becomes crystal clear. It's the program. I'm not guaranteed anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am recovering when I'm applying these steps to my life, and I'm not when I'm not. And the 10th step needs help. That I can't even do the 10th step appropriately without the 11th step. And so next week, not only are we going to talk about the 11th step, but we're going to talk about how impossible, for me, it's impossible to actually do step 10 to any real effect in my life without step 11. It's absolutely, it's just, it almost doesn't exist without step 11, without starting my day on purpose. Thanks.